സയൻസ് ട്രസ്റ്റിൻ്റെ 9ാം വാർഷികവും അതോടനുബന്ധിച്ച് സാധാരണ നടത്താറുള്ള പ്രേമാനന്ദ് മെമ്മോറിയൽ ലെക്ചർ, 7ാമത്തെ പ്രേമാനന്ദ് മെമ്മോറിയൽ ലെക്ചർ, അതും കൂടെയാണ് ഇന്നത്തെ പരിപാടികൾ. അതിൽ ഈ സെഷൻ പ്രേമാനന്ദ് മെമ്മോറിയൽ ലെക്ചറിൻ്റെ ഭാഗമായിട്ടാണ്. അത് പ്രധാനമായിട്ടും ഇതിന് പങ്കെടുക്കാൻ വേണ്ടി വന്ന അതിഥികളെ സ്വാഗതം ചെയ്യുക എന്നതാണ് എൻ്റെ ഉദ്ദേശം. ആദ്യമായിട്ട് മെമ്മോറിയൽ ലെക്ചറായിട്ട് യൂണിഫോം സിവിൽ കോഡ് ആൻഡ് വിമൻ എന്ന വിഷയത്തെപ്പറ്റി സംസാരിക്കാൻ സന്നിഹിതയായിരിക്കുന്ന ലീന ലാബിറു ഞാൻ സ്വാഗതം ചെയ്യുന്നു, ഈ പരിപാടിയിലേക്ക് സ്വാഗതം ചെയ്യുന്നു. പിന്നീട് ഡോക്ടർ നരേന്ദ്ര നായിക്, അഡ്വക്കേറ്റ് PM സുരേഷ് ബാബു, അഡ്വക്കേറ്റ് AV അൻവർ, പ്രൊഫസർ രവിചന്ദ്രൻ, പിന്നെ ഈ പരിപാടി അധ്യക്ഷം വഹിക്കുന്ന ഡോക്ടർ C വിശ്വനാഥൻ എന്നീ മഹൽ വ്യക്തികളെയും ഞാൻ ഈ പരിപാടിയിലേക്ക് ഹൃദയംഗമമായി സ്വാഗതം ചെയ്യുന്നു. അതുപോലെ മറ്റുള്ള എല്ലാ സുഹൃത്തുക്കളെയും, ഇതിൽ പങ്കെടുക്കാൻ വന്ന മറ്റെല്ലാ സുഹൃത്തുക്കളെയും സ്വാഗതം ചെയ്യുന്നു. താങ്ക് യു.
സുഹൃത്തുക്കളെ, യൂണിഫോം സിവിൽ കോഡ് ആൻഡ് വിമൻ എന്ന വിഷയത്തെക്കുറിച്ചാണ് ഈ സെഷൻ. ആദ്യം പ്രേമാനന്ദ് മെമ്മോറിയൽ ലെക്ചർ ലീന ഡബെറു, അവരെ ഒന്ന് പരിചയപ്പെടുത്തുക എന്നുള്ളതാണ് ഉദ്ദേശം. ആ വിഷയത്തെക്കുറിച്ച് എൻ്റെ ഒരു ചെറിയൊരു നിരീക്ഷണവും കൂടി പറയാമെന്ന് വിചാരിക്കുന്നു. ലീന സ്വയം പരിചയപ്പെടുത്താൻ ആഗ്രഹിക്കുന്നത് ആസ് എ ഹ്യൂമനിസ്റ്റ് ഹു ബിലീവ്സ് ഇൻ എൻ ഇക്വിറ്റബിൾ സൊസൈറ്റി എന്നാണ്. ഡൽഹി യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റിയിലാണ് അവർ നിയമ വിദ്യാഭ്യാസം നേടിയത്. അനേകം പൊതു താൽപ്പര്യ ഹർജികൾ ഈ അർബൻ പ്ലാനിങ്ങും അതുപോലെ അർബൻ ഡെവലപ്മെൻറ്റിൻ്റെ മണ്ഡലങ്ങളിൽ നഗരവികസനത്തിൻ്റെയും നഗര പ്ലാനിങ്ങിൻ്റെയും നഗരാസൂത്രണത്തിൻ്റെയും രംഗത്ത് വിവിധ പബ്ലിക് ഇൻട്രസ്റ്റ് ലിറ്റിഗേഷനുകൾ ലീന നടത്തിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. ഗവൺമെൻറ് ബൈ ദ പീപ്പിൾ, ബൈ ദ പീപ്പിൾ, ബൈ ദ പീപ്പിൾ എന്നൊരു പുസ്തകം എഴുതിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. മറ്റൊരു പുസ്തകം ലാൻഡ് റൈറ്റ്സ് ആർ ഹ്യൂമൻ റൈറ്റ്സ് എന്നൊരു പുസ്തകം. ഇങ്ങനെ 2 പുസ്തകങ്ങൾ എഴുതിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. ബഹിഷ്കൃതരായ പല അശരണ സമൂഹങ്ങളുടെ ലാൻഡ് റൈറ്റ്സിനു വേണ്ടി, അവരുടെ ഭൂമിക്കുള്ള അവകാശത്തിനായി അനേകം പോരാട്ടങ്ങൾ നടത്തിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. ഉത്തർപ്രദേശിൽ ഓരോ മാനുവൽ സ്കാവെഞ്ചിങ്ങിൽ ഏർപ്പെട്ടിട്ടുള്ള, തോട്ടിപ്പണിയിൽ ഏർപ്പെട്ടിട്ടുള്ള സ്ത്രീകൾക്ക് ഓരോ ആൾക്കും 5 ഏക്കർ വീതം ലാൻഡ് കൊടുക്കണമെന്നാവശ്യപ്പെട്ടുകൊണ്ടുള്ള ഒരു ഭീമ ഹർജി 1,00,000 ആൾക്കാർ ഒപ്പിട്ടത് കൊടുക്കാൻ അതിനുവേണ്ടി പ്രവർത്തിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. അങ്ങനെ പല നിലക്കും പൊതുരംഗത്ത് പ്രവർത്തിക്കുന്ന ലീന ദാബെറുവിനെ ഈ മെമ്മോറിയൽ ലെക്ചറിനെ ക്ഷണിക്കുന്നു. ഐ ഇൻവൈറ്റ് ലീന ദാബെറു ഫോർ ദി പ്രേമാനന്ദ് മെമ്മോറിയൽ ലെക്ചർ.
Thank you, Doctor. Good evening, everyone. I think it's like evening now. I'm so sorry I have to speak in English, but I think we all understand these days, everyone understands English, so we won't have any problem. I'm so happy and I'm thankful for the organizer that you have actually called me to give a memorial lecture on such a topic and in the name of such an important person, Premanand. I would like, more than anything else, I am feeling very, very happy and proud of myself that I've been called for such thing, and I'm very happy today. The topic which was given and was decided was Uniform Civil Code. Briefly, I couldn't understand exactly what was introduced, but because of my legal studies and I have been working with the various organizations and people's movement in Delhi and nationally. So I have got a lot of chance to revisit many of the laws, redraft some of the important legislatures, and also represent the poor in the court on various issues. So women rights have been one of my key issue, and that's how Uniform Civil Code also comes into play. When we talk about Uniform Civil Code in this present government, like I'm not talking about the state government, I'm actually talking, when I'm talking about government, that means I'm talking about the central government. So the present government, it is directly related to gender justice. So what is this? Uniform Civil Code equal to gender justice. So we think that everything is possible when we have a uniform civil code, then all the problems related to gender, related to women will be, solved in split of the second. That is the impression which has been given to us by this present government in almost all their discussions. But we as social activists, also politically, we are very, very aware. And moreover, when we talk to the community at large, not only the religious communities, religious minorities, but also the communities which are there, who are socially also very, marginalized. There are many tribal communities, there are Dalits, there are many various kinds of communities which are there in our country. We apparently see this entire debate of Uniform Civil Code has been targeted to one particular community. And the questionnaire which the Law Commission Office distributed, if you take a glance of it, you will come to know that it has nothing to do but to target one minority community, that is Muslims. So, what is Uniform Civil Code? Are we very clear about it? Do we really know that it is just a magic wand, or it has lots of different implications? So we really have to know what do you mean by Uniform Civil Code. According to the basic definition which was there for many years and it's still on, it is the proposal to replace the personal laws based on scriptures and customs of each major religious community in India with a common set of laws governing every citizen. So we have Article 44 of the Constitution and the Directive Principle of State Policy, which also says that the implementation of such a Uniform Civil Code, kind of a uniform code, is the duty of the government. So it was after lots of debates in the Constitutional Assembly, it was pulled out from the fundamental right area to Directive Principle area. So what do we then mean that, all the religious personal laws will be set aside and we will have one uniform personal law for everyone? So if this is true, then all religious and communities across length and breadth of India, what happens is then if it covers every community, every part of the country, every personal law, even if it is tribal personal laws or whatever it is, if it covers that, then why the government is debating that due to passing of Uniform Civil Code, Muslim women will gain out of it? Why is that kind of a statement given? So they also presume that Hindu societies, Hindu communities are very egalitarian and they are inherently gender just. They don't have any problems like discrimination or violence against women. they just don't have anything. All the Hindu society is absolutely egalitarian. They also presume many other things, but then Christians also come up with their own ecos. Tribals, Dalits have also raised their concern against the questionnaire of Law Commission. So basically, what are we talking about when it comes to Uniform Civil Code? In this present government, the discussions we are having only in this present government. So what is that we are talking about? Who is the person, who are these group of people who are forming this opinion? Is it the media? Or is it a certain political party, maybe the right-wing political party or the social organizations? But are they, will this not be undermining our diversity which we have in our country, where we have our freedom to choose whatever we want to do, and if we want to practice something, we can practice. For me, it was very difficult. It was very, very difficult to sort of break the ice. So we thought of actually going into the majority religious community, that is Hindu personal law, and to revisit it and see what are the things which are very, very egalitarian in our in Hindu culture, and how it is gender just, and the way it has been portrayed by the present government. So when we were talking about, then it was basically the first issue which had come, that in Hindu tradition, birth of a girl child is not celebrated. In many communities, when the girl is born, they think that it has become a liability to the family. There are many Hindu rituals which is not celebrated if a girl child is born in the family. In North India, there is a festival called Lodi. It is not celebrated if a girl child is born. If a boy is born, then it is celebrated. So do we really think that Hinduism is egalitarian? So that's one thing which we were thinking about. And then in many we have seen in 1955, after a lot of debates, we had this Hindu Code Bill which had come. So Hindu Code Bill talks about that you have now the woman has the right over property. She has some more social rights. She has a right to even divorce. Before that, there was no chance of Hindu women seeking divorce. Then we have many discriminative practices like Maitri Karar, Nata Patra, polyandry among Hindus. Maitri Karar is a kind of a rule which is there, which is in Gujarat, where the man actually enters into a friendship deed and he can then live with any woman he wants to. So this is the practice which is there in Hindu culture. In Rajasthan, there is this one tradition where a man can actually sell his wife. So there are multiple, levels of discrimination against women which is inherent in different cultures of Hinduism. And then we were going into seeing what is the scope, what is happening with female feticide cases. You must be knowing that the North Indian state, most of them have a very, very bad ratio. Kerala is the only example we have where the ratio is absolutely, not only absolutely equal, but it is more. Women are more in Kerala. But if you see in places like Punjab, in Delhi, even the educated portions of the, geographically, if you see that the educated parts of Delhi has more problem when it comes to the sex ratio. There are very few females as compared to 1,000 boys born. And the government is spending so much money in educating people for Ladki Padhao types of programs, and also educating, raiding some of the dispensaries. They are, trying to, put a big poster saying that sex-selected ultrasound is not allowed here. So there's a lot of money being pumped into just to educate our educated Hindu society that, sex determination is wrong and you should not be killing the child in the womb. So these are the some things which we saw in our culture. And moreover, when we were examining some of the property right issues, then we saw a Hindu undivided family where the daughters were not part of that Hindu undivided family. It was later daughters were given right to the property as late as 2005. And in 2016, just recently, Delhi High Court established that no, daughters can also be kartas in the Hindu undivided family. So this is how the, Hindu laws, which are called very progressive, are on women. So then we have Hindu culture. It is also said that daughters are a liability to father. Liability to father as in the daughter has this moral obligation and the cultural and social obligation by any means, because it is called paraya dhan, some other person's property. So he has to marry that daughter off as soon as possible. So marrying the daughter off, he has to give a lot of dowry also. So dowry system is also inherent in this culture. So you giving dowry, that means that giving of dowry is not helping the girl so much so that the man's, father's, social value increases. So that is one of the inherent thing in in our Hindu culture. So woman has no right to divorce. They don't have the right to even remarry. If a husband dies, then before 1955, there was no right that woman could remarry. Then inheriting a piece of land was also not in her scope. Interestingly, just recently, the Supreme Court has actually given a verdict, a decree of divorce to a husband who filed a case of divorce on the ground of cruelty because the wife does not want to live with his parents. So it's very interesting that the wife declined to live in the same matrimonial house as his parents were living. So the Supreme Court given that it considered that ground as cruelty. So we have these kind of court cases also coming into place. But had this particular thing been looked into by the Supreme Court through some other personal law, maybe the Muslim, Christian or Parsis, then they would not have got the divorce. But Hindu personal law, it is very valid reason and you can seek divorce. Now then we thought of entering into the Muslim personal law issue, and then we thought that let's see what Muslim personal law talks about women and women's right. So Muslim marriages are basically nothing but civil contract. It is a contract which has been adopted not only by later on by Hindu code bill, but it was also adopted in many of the European communities. This contract actually is given on lieu of a meher, which is called consideration, as in contract law has some consideration, and the marriage becomes solemnized. So if you look into that, then we also see that Muslim women can demand a right of khula, that is that they can demand divorce and they can take back their meher. which is not the possibility in any of the religious personal laws, which is one of the very progressive one. And moreover, we have also the in Muslim laws we have the right to property also. It is given, it is written in that women also get the share in the property. So the percentage of the share varies, but still she gets the share in the property. Though because of the influence of Hindu practices and culture, it has been a little corrupted, but still, if she goes to the court with her own personal law, she will gain out of it. Before Hindu code bill, Hindu man could have married any number of women. There was no cap. Like the Muslim personal law has a cap of 4 women, but Hindus never had any cap. But there is a very recent survey which talks about the polygamy cases in Hindu men. The polygamy cases in Hindu men was 5.8%. Vis-a-vis Muslim men, which was 5.6%. So you can see when their law has allowed them to marry 4 wives, but still the polygamy cases are less in Muslims than Hindus. Now what happens is, very interestingly, then you talk about how does that matter? I would say that it is very easy for a Hindu man to say that this woman is a second wife. He will be only charged with polygamous sections of IPC. Apart from that, he is not charged with that. And the woman in turn is, humiliated badly, saying that she is second woman and she is a keep, or something like, bad words are used. Though I don't want to use those words, but still, it is basically the courts have used that. And she is denied of any right. Right to shelter is the fundamental. She will not get that. She will not get any other right of maintenance and nothing. Her children are also discarded in that way. Vis-a-vis, if you see the Muslim law, if a Muslim man has second wife, the second wife has the right to go to the court and demand shelter, housing and everything. So there are these kind of laws which are present in front of us, and the present government is targeting, saying that Muslim women are more deprived than Hindu women. And if we look into the laws and seeing that, we see that Hindu woman is much more discriminated socially and culturally and legally also than Muslim women. So now going back to the entire discussion of Uniform Civil Code, what will happen? Now in India, if you go from one state to another state, the Hindu culture is a little, it's changing. So when we travel, when we go into the northern states, like for example, if I go to UP, then we have a traditional practice that a man cannot marry a woman of the same village. He cannot marry a woman of his mother's village, and he cannot marry a woman of his father's village. That means 3 villages, girls, he cannot marry. But when we come to South India, we see that this intermarriages are happening within the family. It is happening. Girls are marrying their first cousins, but these are all Hindus. So culturally it is very diverse. And when the Hindu code will come, then we have to see what is going to happen where. What are these laws which are going to change? Is it the only idea of changing Muslim law, or whether this Hindu laws, customary practices are also going to get changed? So there is no argument on that. There is not a single political party which is raising that issue, except for absolutely talking about the ban on Uniform Civil Code. Then when we are talking about this uniform civil code, I would also like to draw attention that we have India's right wing has manipulated UCC a lot. In the Constitutional Assembly debate, we have to go into, because this debate was debated a good number of time, and there was this in the Constitutional Assembly debate, the Hindu right wing actually opposed it at that point of time, because there were some leaders who were saying that there has to be a uniformity, but Hindu right wing opposed at that point of time, saying that it will break the patriarchal system of our country. So that is again a very big issue, and we have to talk about it in terms of religious practices, humanist practices, and what a woman should actually need. What are we actually targeting upon? Are we talking about a society which has all the legal rights for women, or we are talking about a society which is very, very equitable, and it is very egalitarian, where the rights of women is not asserted through a court of law, it is given by the society itself. So that's what we have. We have actually seen while reading through all the laws. And then a very interesting thing is that the Hindu Code Bill also put everyone together. Like, for example, the Sikhs are also part of Hindu. The Jains are part of Hindu. Buddhists are also part of Hindu. And the Hindu personal laws will be applicable to them. Then we have atheists who don't practice any religion are also part of Hindu personal law. So this is something which becomes very difficult when you go to court and try to get justice. So looking at the diversity which India has, like for example, if you see Khasi communities which are there in Manipur, Shillong, Meghalaya and Tripura, the Khasi communities is matrilineal communities, and they have their own customs. They don't follow any particular, they don't even go to the court, in fact. They solve their cases on their own and had been very successful in doing that. But this particular law of the land has been so dominating on them that the patriarchy has come out openly in them, and it has actually corrupted their system of practices, their legal practices. So what we have actually then decided is that at this point of time, when we have so much of unrest in this country, where a blatant attack on the freedom of speech, freedom of every right, and then blatant attack on the minority communities, Dalits have been also, brutally sidelined. In this point of time, when there are so many riots which had happened, this is not the time when we are talking about Uniform Civil Code, because Uniform Civil Code is much above the norm. And it has also been believed by some of the legal experts that any uniformity in law would probably, especially in the social laws, will probably bring a lot of unrest in the society. But then we have certain laws. We have many laws, in fact. We have a Special Marriage Act law. We have a Muslim Women Divorce Rights Act. We have Domestic Violence Act. We have Maintenance Act, Succession Act. We have many such acts. And if we try to reform those personal law and bring these distressed women in the ambit of some progressive laws, then we probably will swim together. It is not necessary that we need to completely abolish all the personal laws, and at the same time women can take recourse to the court. So this it's very interesting that this idea of uniform civil code was never the agenda of right-wing politics, but it has now become a major right-wing politics, and we really have to safeguard our religious minority, the communities which we are working with. We have to safeguard their rights, because this is a time when we are living in, when there is lot of unrest and there is lot of fear. There is a little hatred between two communities was also seen. So this is the time when we really have to challenge it and say that no, we don't want it. Later on, probably with a very progressive kind of a government and a progressive kind of experts, we can have this discussion later on. But at this point of time, it will be very, very counterproductive. And then when it comes to this Constitution Assembly debates, it was also the Constitution Assembly spelled clearly that each religious community has a certain law inseparable and is connected to their religious belief and practices, and it should be kept intact. One of the members of the Constitution Assembly actually opposed it. Even Ambedkar opposed it later, and he said that we should. He actually quoted a wonderful example of North Malabar. There is a practice which is called, now I can't pronounce that, it is Marumakkathayam or something like that, which is a matriarchal form of family law. And he said that if at all there has to be a uniformity, then this kind of a uniform civil code should come into practice, because it is a matrilineal form and women will be removed out of the clutches of patriarchy. So I would rest my case here, and I would say that the aim should not be uniformity of law, but it should be the aim should be uniformity of rights and not uniform law. And this is because all the personal laws are very patriarchal, they are unjust, it is very, very traditional and conservative. And gender, apart from giving some spelt things which is written, especially in the Muslim personal law, apart from that there is nothing which talks about any gender, justice. So I would definitely talk about that uniform civil code would be very good if we will have a very homogeneous, one culture, one language, one society, one nation kind of a right-wing concept. And if we don't believe in that we are diverse, we have different religions, we have different languages, we have different ethnicities, we believe in diversity, and we believe in that let whosoever want to practice whatever, we believe in that, then we have to oppose at the present form of uniform civil code. Otherwise it will be very, very counterproductive for our society at large. Thank you.